morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the theme for today's episode is Game Changers. Well, actually, Game Changers with an asterisk, because I think that these are potential game changers, but nothing is definitive just quite yet. And that is despite all the headlines blasted across multiple industry trades yesterday with our first story, and that's that Netflix has landed itself a Brad Pitt movie. And I agree, on the surface, this does seem like a game changer. I believe Deadline led with those very words. But I think that when you look at the picture more closely, we're going to actually look at two Brad Pitt pictures today. I think Paramount, by far and away, has the better project. And you can see why Netflix was able to land the film that it did. So what's the Netflix film? Well, it's called War Machine, and Netflix has paid $30 million for the rights to distribute this film, which will probably also cover the budget of the movie. So they made this deal up front. The film hasn't already been made, like with the similar Beasts of No Nation from Idris Elba and Cary Fukunaga. This film is in the gestating stages, and Netflix has said, we want that, and it's currently slated for 2017. And it's supposed to be the story of, General Stanley McChrystal, who, of course, was at first famous for leading the entire American war effort in Afghanistan, but then became infamous when he was interviewed for Rolling Stone, and they quoted him saying some really disparaging things about the administration, Vice President Joe Biden in particular. So he had to come back to Washington, he was recalled back, and he had to hand his resignation in to President Obama. And now he teaches at Yale. So I think they're going for a modern-day Patton story here. Patton's a great movie. If you haven't seen Patton, starring George C. Scott, definitely watch it. It's a bit of a commitment. It's like 3 hours or so in terms of the running time, but it's worth it. But just make sure you have that stretch of time available to yourself to really immerse yourself in the film and enjoy it. So it's a high bar indeed to try and do a modern version of that type of film. But I think Brad Pitt, to his credit, is a very diverse a filmmaker at this point, producing so many films that sometimes he stars and sometimes he doesn't. People have been pointing with this deal to his success with 12 Years a Slave and Selma, but that's clearly a very specific type of film that he's succeeded with so far, and the Stanley McChrystal story doesn't fit in with those films. So we'll see how well this is received. But here's the biggest red flag about War Machine, and that's that it's going to be directed by David Michod, who first came on the scene with Animal Kingdom. He's an Australian director. Lots of awards buzz for that film, several nominations, as you might recall. But then his follow-up was The Rover, which I know some of you really enjoyed. I thought it was like nails on a chalkboard. I really disliked it, and it did not do well. Again, while some people did like it, it did find an audience, a small one, but it did find it. However, it's important to note that both of these films only made $1 million in the United States at the box office, and even worldwide, Animal Kingdom only got up to $7 million, and The Rover only up to a little under $2.5 million. And The Rover didn't get any awards consideration. Maybe in Australia, I don't know that off the top of my head, but certainly here in the United States, nobody paid attention to it during Oscars or Golden Globes. They got more attention for starring Robert Pattinson than anything else. So you could see why no other studio would want to give $30 million to such a production, right? Even though it stars Brad Pitt, they'd be like, I'm not giving $30 million to David Michod. I won't be able to do anything with it. No one will pay to see it. No one will award it. Now, the other thing is that Brad Pitt himself is not always a slam dunk. He has The Counselor, Killing Them Softly, and The Tree of Life. 3 films that he made recently, which again, very nicely filled out and diversified his personal resume as an artist, but from a business perspective, didn't land. So Brad Pitt is not even a slam dunk when it comes to making movies like this. So I think Netflix, they shouldn't feel they cheated anybody else out. They found the right opportunity for them to come in and rescue a movie that probably nobody else would want to make, especially for this price tag. And let's see what the reward is. I doubt they'll actually make a profit on this film. We'll see. But they might be able to lure other talent with Brad Pitt's name, and so it's worth the $30 million right there. So what's the other movie? I said we're going to talk about 2 Brad Pitt movies, and don't worry, you're not getting cheated out of 3 stories. This is all considered the one. But Paramount is putting together another film with Brad Pitt, which is written by Stephen Knight, who wrote Locke, and he's also writing Brad Pitt's upcoming World War Z 2. He's also, worked on Seventh Son, which didn't work out so well, but I think, he wrote, Stephen Knight wrote Locke as well, as I said, so he has some cachet as a writer. So he's written this script about 2 World War II assassins, and they have to go into Germany and kill an ambassador, and while they're there, on the mission, they fall in love. And then Brad Pitt would play the male spy, it's a male and female spy, and Brad Pitt's character is French-Canadian. So they fall in love and they retire, but then Brad Pitt discovers that this woman he married is actually a double agent who's been working for the Germans all along, and he has to kill her. And none other than Marion Cotillard is in talks for that other role. So that sounds like a fantastic movie, the kind of movie that a big studio like Paramount would be willing to invest in. It's got 2 big name talents. It's got a very strong name behind the camera with Zemeckis. We'll see. Zemeckis has had a rocky past himself. This isn't going to be a ridiculously expensive film, but still, I think this sounds a little bit like something that people would pay to see in the theater. So I'm curious, what do you think of the 2 properties? Do you think how do you feel Netflix did in this deal? Do you think that they had a slam dunk, or do you think they just did a good deal? And which ones are you interested in seeing in which context? Would you see War Machine, directed by David Michod, if it wasn't on Netflix, right? And what do you think of this other movie? Do you agree with me that it's a little bit more of a sure bet than War Machine? All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is something that's been a rumor for a while now, thanks to James Gunn, but it's been confirmed, and that is that Marvel will not be going to Comic-Con this year. Specifically, there will be no Hall H Marvel Studios panel, which I think, isn't as shocking as it was when it was originally rumored. I mean, I think when you have something come out as a rumor, and maybe this was the master plan all along, Kevin Feige is very savvy in some ways, in particular with promotion. So maybe by having this come out as a rumor, it kind of softened the blow for when it was later confirmed, right? Because a lot of people felt, oh, that wouldn't happen. But then at the same time, it doesn't mean we're not getting a Hall H type panel, which is another thing that softens the blow. It's just going to take place at another time this year in another city for the Disney company itself. Everybody knows that the reason that they're not going to Comic-Con is because they're going to D23. D23 is going to be a huge event this year. It takes place in, I believe, like the second week of August, so I think August like 13th, 14th. But just think about it. They're going to have Marvel panels, Star Wars panels, Disney Animation, Pixar, live-action fairy tale announcements. It's going to be huge. And to be honest, we're in a situation where the Disney company does not need Comic-Con anymore. And Comic-Con is so crowded, you can't really blame Disney for moving to their own private event, so to speak. Now that you're invited to. Anyone can buy tickets to go to D23, and they really want to build D23 up to be its own Comic-Con type event. Now, the question is, if this succeeds, what will the other studios do? Because don't forget that Marvel is able to make headlines just any time of the year, like they did with the Phase 3 announcement, which didn't need Comic-Con to get it got so many headlines. It got headlines going into the event with the anticipation for what it could be. They announced it on Friday, and people talked about it all weekend. Then they dominated the discussion for the next couple of days when they had the event on Monday, because there was no competition. Whereas at Comic-Con, there is headline after headline after headline. So you not only have to make headlines, but you have to fight to keep your headline on the front page for as long as possible before another studio comes and knocks it off. So why do that? It's like, it would be the equivalent of releasing all of your movies the same weekend. It makes no sense. Why not spread them out? And you might see a situation where studios decide to spread out their announcements, which I would actually think is a good idea. I mean, look how well it worked for Star Wars Celebration just a few weeks ago, where they had their own Star Wars event, and they were able to have a lot of great announcements and dominate the press for several days. They coupled it with a Vanity Fair cover. It was just really, really savvy and very well done. So I think that Disney is going to succeed with this change, and I think you're going to see other studios probably follow suit. And what will this mean for Comic-Con? Well, Comic-Con, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a couple days, I gave some advice, and I said, I think about Marvel specifically, and that's that you should never take your lead for granted. Even if you seem like you're on top of the world, you need to constantly evolve and make sure that you are at the top of your game and you're beating out all your competition and that you can stay at the top. And I think Comic-Con really took it for granted that they would be the place to go forever when it came to pop culture news. And they didn't do enough, I think, to assuage the problems of people attending. It's almost impossible to get a ticket. It's almost impossible to get a hotel room. It's almost impossible to get into Hall H. Nothing was was done to fix those complaints. Then when people who actually presented the convention had problems, nothing was done to assuage those complaints. Comic-Con basically took the approach with everybody, be it attendee or exhibitor, that you need to be here, and so you're just going to put up with what we give you. And the result is that people are saying, no, that's not true. I'm going to have my own event, and people will probably, and then attendees will say, I'm going to attend those other events. And the only positive thing that could come out of this is perhaps a refocusing at Comic-Con on comics. But if people, then that determines what drives what's the horse and what's the cart when it comes to comic book characters. Is it these, on-screen properties, be it live action, television, or animation, or is it still the comics? It's a Pandora's box, and I don't think that the lid can be closed again as to what drives the future of these characters. It used to be comics, but I think these days it's large. I think comics aren't totally out of the game, but they're not driving anymore. All right, so that's the second story of the day, and I'm very curious to how you guys feel. Are you sad about Marvel not going to Comic-Con? Do you think it's time for Comic-Con's reign of terror to end? And what do you think of just, do you think other studios should follow suit as well? All right, now the third story of the day, this is very interesting. This is one of those potential game changers for sure. And that's that Warner Brothers is still intent on making a live-action Akira film, and they've actually hired another screenwriter to take a crack at it. They had another version of the live-action Akira that got pretty close to going into production, but they ended up scrapping it at the last minute, in no small part because of a number of complaints about whitewashing the film. That's going to factor into today's viewer question, so we'll discuss that then. But they hired a writer, and they hired someone very interesting. They've picked Daredevil writer Marco J. Ramirez, who's also worked on Sons of Anarchy, and he's been promoted just recently to the Season 2 co-showrunner for Daredevil on Netflix. So he's in a very hot show, and he has a lot of credibility from the fan community, right? Everybody feels that Daredevil knocked it out of the park. Not only was it really faithful to the source material, but it was also fluid and inventive and able to keep up with the changing trends in comic book properties being adapted to any size screen, as we just said. So Daredevil, very smart to attach something that's going to be a really hot, contested topic to such a well-received property. To say, hey, you were worried about Daredevil, the only thing they could do is put Christopher Nolan on it. And they'd be like, in Nolan we trust, guys, right? Leave us alone. And so I think they're trying to get a similar situation with Marco J. Ramirez writing the script. Now, the reason I think this could be a big game changer is if they maybe move this into a place where they have a really diverse sci-fi cast. I think from a business perspective, they can't have an entirely Asian cast, as such as the original anime did. But I think that they can have something that has some very strong Asian characters in it. You don't have to change everybody. You can just change one or two, or just maybe one character. And to create a truly diverse cast along the lines of Fast and Furious, which of course has done incredibly well at the box office, partially because of its diversity. So I think that Warner Brothers has a real opportunity here to make a great live-action adaptation of a fantastic property that I think is in a good place to be adapted, because Akira is something that has never really reached critical mass, right? It's always been an undiscovered gem with a cult fan base. Just the other day we talked about what's a good property for a remake, and I think one of the criteria is something that just never ever reaches the level that it should. So to introduce it to a wider audience, you do a remake or an adaptation, and then hopefully people will consider going and rediscovering the original. And so I think Akira is at that point, because as much as we'd like everyone to go and watch the original anime, people aren't doing that. It's never going to get to the level that a live-action film would. So the live-action film has a responsibility to honor that original property and not just be a cash grab, right? The purpose of it should be to make money, obviously, because this is a business, but also to do Akira justice. And I think part of that would be to really, bring, Asian talent into the mainstream in Hollywood. China and Japan are getting very aggressive in the global film market already, but I think this is an opportunity for Hollywood to really embrace that. And it's in their favor, because we just talked about on Movie Math how China favors films that have strong Chinese participation. Of course, Akira is Japanese, but still, it's the region those threesomes, South Korea, Japan, and China, are huge box office treasure troves. So you just want to get in that general area. So I think that, and also there was I believe, a recent Japanese animated movie that did very well in China, because even though there's some animosity, apparently it doesn't cross over to entertainment, which is interesting, because we have that discussion all the time here in the United States about, we just talked about it with, The Walk and September 11th. Can you take, your political feelings and separate them from what you want to see from an entertainment perspective? And that seems to be the case, perhaps with China and Japan after all, which would be a big deal for Hollywood, which is like, oh man, I'm having a hard enough time, getting people to incorporate diversity into my films. Now I have to watch out for nationality as well. So if we could fix that, I think it would make progress go forward a lot faster. So I think Akira, it's not dead at Warner Brothers, and it's not dead as a really unique and interesting opportunity for just film in general. So this leads into the viewer question, which is from regular BTT viewer W.S. Fletcher. And W.S. says, question, good morning, Grace. Love the show. Helps soothe my days in the office. Excellent. I hope you're having a good day today. I have a question. As much as we talk about the whitewashing in Hollywood, take, for instance, the fact that Cameron Crowe's need to apologize to critics for the casting of Emma Stone to play a multiracial character. Do you see this as a turning point where the creative behind a movie are held just as accountable as the studios, and in turn could they attempt to cast accordingly? I have a rudimentary understanding of the business side and how the studio approaches these situations, dollars and cents, more dollars though. Sense, I think, as in common sense. That's very funny. And I believe change would need to start with the creative behind a movie, the directors, producers, and even fellow performers. Do you ever see whitewashing in Hollywood truly becoming a thing of the past? Thank you for reading. Smiley face. All right, to answer your last part of the question, yes, I think that whitewashing is going away. I think that the question is how long will it take, and I think it's questions like that I just answered. Do we have to be so strict on nationality? Can we just go for ethnicity? Also, what do people pay to see? That's going to be the game changer. And Cameron Crowe would not have apologized if people had made such a big stink about it, to the point where it was really starting to hurt, I think, his career in the long run, certainly his image. And so I think that if media and people who just are, consumers hadn't really just taken to the internet to complain about this, you never would have seen an apology. And by the way, I saw someone respond to W.S. Fletcher, another frequent BTT viewer, Johnny. And Johnny said, well, the whole point of Emma Stone playing that role is that she wasn't supposed to look Asian. Well, and Cameron Crowe has said, I base this on an actual person I know who is part Asian and does not look at it all, and she has some frustrations about it, whatever. Well, the whole problem is that Emma Stone is not at all part Asian. So, it is whitewashing. And I think that, you could say, well, it's hard to find a name actress who has the right look, who has the right background. But the thing is, make the effort. There are other roles in that movie where they have name talent: Rachel McAdams, Bradley Cooper, Alec Baldwin, John Krasinski, Bill Murray. You don't need the Emma Stone character to be another name, right? Go make a discovery. Remember Renee Zellweger? Who the heck knew who Renee Zellweger was until Cameron Crowe discovered her for Jerry Maguire? She became a huge movie star, at least for a little while. So why can't he go and do that again for this role? And I think that the reason there aren't a lot of actresses who have that kind of mixed background is because there aren't enough opportunities for them. And then Cameron Crowe goes and writes one distinctly for that type of a person, and they can't even get that role. I mean, you hear it a lot from different ethnicities saying, how am I supposed to get work in Hollywood when I can't even get the roles that are supposed to be for people like me? So the reason this, I think, is going to change is because finally people aren't being quiet about it. They're speaking up, and thanks to the internet, another great thing the internet has given us is that people can complain. The press can't be controlled by the studios and just make these complaints go away. You're seeing a similar situation happen with Black Widow. And for instance, a lot of people asked me about the We Want Widow movement yesterday, with a lot of flash mobs and discussion on social media, with people really trying to show Marvel that enough is enough already. Marvel and Disney, we want our Black Widow toys, we want our Black Widow merchandise, we want our Black Widow movie. We just want more respect for a character that we all really love. And, very loud, and I think that, one of the reasons you're getting a Captain Marvel movie and a Black Panther movie is because people wouldn't stop asking Kevin Feige about it. And so he's like, man, people really want this. So I think that the vocalness is what's changed, and that's going to lead ultimately to the change in terms of whitewashing in Hollywood. So the long and short of it is, Keep complaining if you're unhappy about something. We've said here the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I think we're finally getting a squeak loud enough that even Hollywood can't ignore it. Cameron Crowe certainly couldn't, and I think, by the way, despite his apology, this is still going to be a problem for him for a while, and I wonder if it's going to hurt Emma Stone as well. Luckily, nobody saw the movie. Alright, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.